Listen, I am just a regular guy who wants to do his job, get paid, and go home. You know that feeling, right? You just want to put your head down, do the work, and collect your paycheck. But sometimes, the universe decides to test you. Or rather, terrible corporate management decides to test you. And let me tell you, when you push a guy who has absolutely nothing to lose and a very deep understanding of contract law, you are going to have a profoundly bad time. Let me set the scene for you. I used to work in sales for a mid-sized tech company. We sold enterprise logistics software to freight and trucking firms. It sounds incredibly boring because it is incredibly boring, but it pays well, or at least it is supposed to pay well. For 4 years, I was the undisputed top earner in the entire building. I brought in over 60% of the revenue for my entire department. I was an absolute machine. I lived on burnt office coffee, cold sandwiches, and sheer spite. I was working 60-hour weeks and carrying the weight of the entire sales floor on my back. But this story is not really about me. It is about my boss. Her name was Karen. And yes, she was exactly what you are picturing in your head right now. Karen was the vice president of sales, a title she got not by being good at selling things, but by being the chief executive officer's sister-in-law. It is your classic, infuriating corporate nepotism story. Let me just take a minute to explain how much I absolutely despise this woman. I hated everything about her. I hated the way she walked into the office at 10:30 in the morning, holding a massive iced coffee that smelled like pure vanilla syrup and unearned entitlement. I hated her car. She drove this least obnoxiously huge white luxury sports utility vehicle. You know the exact kind I'm talking about. The kind that has never seen a single speck of dirt or gravel in its life. And of course, she always parked it across 2 spots right by the front door. Not because the spots were small, but because she thought her pristine white status symbol was too precious to be parked near the peasant cars driven by the rest of us. Her clothes were a whole other nightmare. Karen dressed like she was going to a regional real estate convention in 2006. She wore chunky costume jewelry that clacked obnoxiously whenever she moved her arms, leopard print blouses that were always slightly too tight, and shoes that made this deafening sound on the cheap laminate flooring of our office. You could hear her coming from a mile away. Click, clack, click, clack. It was the sound of impending corporate doom, and her laugh. Oh my goodness, her laugh. It was this loud, fake, shrill cackle that she only used when she was making a passive-aggressive comment. She would say something incredibly insulting like, "Wow, you really wore that cheap tie to a client meeting, huh?" And then she would let out that screeching laugh so she could pretend it was just a friendly office joke. Before I tell you how Karen completely destroyed her own life, do me a favor and smash that like button. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Anyway, back to Karen. She loved using corporate buzzwords. She could not speak in normal human sentences. Everything was about synergy or circling back, or taking things offline, or moving the needle, or creating bandwidth. It drove me completely insane. But the worst part about Karen was not her awful personality, her terrible fashion sense, or her buzzwords. It was the fact that she was incredibly greedy and dangerously incompetent at her actual job. When I first started working there, the company was using an absolute dinosaur of a system to track clients. I am talking about Excel spreadsheets from 1998. It was a complete and utter disaster. Leads were constantly falling through the cracks. Salesmen were calling the exact same clients twice in 1 week, and nobody knew what was going on. I realized very quickly that if I wanted to actually make money and hit my quotas, I needed a proper customer relationship management software. I went to Karen and pitched a popular software platform. It cost about $200 a month. I explained how it would increase our efficiency, stop the double calling, and bring in more revenue. She looked at me over her chunky plastic glasses, let out that awful fake laugh, and said, "We are not spending company money on fancy internet toys just because you do not know how to use a basic spreadsheet." We need to lean into our current bandwidth, she probably added in her head. I argued with her. I told her it was a basic tool for the job. She told me, and I quote, "Tools of the trade are the employee's responsibility. If you want a fancy database, build it yourself on your own dime. I am a petty man, but I am also a smart man." So, that is exactly what I did. I went home that weekend and I bought my own internet domain name. I set up my own cloud server. I paid for it out of my own pocket. It was not even that expensive, maybe $50 a month. I installed a powerful open-source database platform. Over the next 3 years, I spent hundreds of hours customizing it. I built automated email funnels. I scrubbed lead data. I created a highly detailed, incredibly valuable database of every single potential logistics client in the country. It had names, direct phone numbers, personal hobbies of the executives, work anniversaries, buying patterns, and budget cycles. It was an absolute goldmine, and because I was using this customized system, I was destroying my sales quotas. I was bringing in millions of dollars in contracts. The rest of the team was still using the stupid spreadsheets, and they were starving. Karen loved to take all the credit for my numbers during the quarterly executive reviews. She would stand up there in her leopard print blouse, clicking her fake acrylic nails against the whiteboard, talking about how her leadership strategy was driving record profits. I just sat there in the back of the room, grinding my teeth, knowing it was entirely because of my private server. I never hid the fact that I was using my own system. In fact, right after I built it, I sent Karen a formal email. I asked her one more time if the company wanted to reimburse me for the server hosting costs and take official ownership of the database. She replied, in writing, saying, "Absolutely not." She reiterated that it was my personal tool, created on my personal time, and the company had zero financial or legal interest in it. I printed that email out. I put it in a fireproof safe at my house. I just had a feeling I would need it one day. Fast forward to year 4. This is where things get really intense. I had been hunting this one specific client for 8 agonizing months, a massive international freight company, a literal whale of a client. This was the kind of contract that makes or breaks an entire fiscal year for a company our size. I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this deal. I missed my best friend's wedding reception because I had to jump on a midnight conference call with their overseas executives. I worked evenings, weekends, holidays. I bought expensive steak dinners on my own personal credit card just to keep the executives happy. Finally, after endless negotiations and sleepless nights, they agreed to sign. The contract was worth $3 million. According to my agreed-upon commission structure, I was going to get a cut of about $85,000. That is life-changing money for a regular guy like me. I was already planning to pay off my mortgage, fix my truck, and maybe take a real vacation to a tropical island for once in my life. The massive contract was signed on a Wednesday. The client wired their massive first payment on Thursday morning. The commission checks were supposed to be cut and handed out on Friday afternoon. I was practically floating on air. I bought 3 dozen donuts for the office on Friday morning to celebrate. Even Karen took one, though she complained loudly about the carbohydrates while chewing it with her mouth open. At 4:45 on Friday afternoon, exactly 15 minutes before the office closed, and the checks were supposed to be distributed, Karen called me into her office. I walked in expecting a massive high five, a speech about how great I am, or maybe just my check. Instead, I saw Dave from Human Resources sitting in the corner. Dave was a quiet, sad-looking guy who always looked like he was about to apologize for existing. The moment I saw Dave sitting there with a manila folder in his lap, my stomach dropped to the floor. You do not bring human resources into a meeting to give someone a high five. Karen was sitting behind her oversized glass desk. She had this absolutely sickening, smug little smile on her face. She folded her hands, the chunky rings clicking together against the glass. "Sit down," she said. Her voice was ice cold. I sat. I could feel my heart starting to hammer in my chest. "What is going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen let out a heavy, dramatic sigh, acting like she was deeply burdened by what she was about to do. "We are going to have to let you go," she said, effective immediately. I just stared at her. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I remember hearing the hum of the overhead air conditioning unit and the faint sound of highway traffic outside the window. I looked at Dave. He was staring intensely at his brown leather shoes, refusing to make eye contact with me. "Let me go," I repeated, trying to process the words bouncing around in my head. I just closed the biggest deal in the history of this entire company. I brought in $3 million 2 days ago. Karen leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. "Yes, and we appreciate your past contributions. But as we move forward and restructure our corporate synergy, we feel that you are no longer a good culture fit for this organization." Culture fit. She was firing me over culture fit. I felt this hot, blinding wave of anger wash over me. My hands started shaking. I knew exactly what was happening. If they fired me before the close of business on Friday, they did not have to pay out my $85,000 commission. There was a dirty, buried little clause in the employee handbook that stated commissions were only paid to active employees at the exact time of payroll distribution. She was firing me to steal my money. "What about my commission?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Karen gave that fake, shrill laugh. "Oh, well, since you will not be an active employee when payroll is processed at 5 o'clock, the commission reverts back to the house. It is standard company policy. But do not worry, Dave will help you box up your desk." She was going to take my $85,000. She was going to use it to pad the departmental budget, which would automatically trigger her massive end-of-year executive management bonus. She was literally stealing a year of my hard work, my missed weekends, and my sanity just to buy herself another leased luxury car. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip her ridiculous glass desk over and watch it shatter into a million pieces. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her terrible outfits, her cheap perfume, and her complete lack of human decency. But I am not a superhero. I am not an action star. I am just a guy. And in that moment, I was a very nervous, very angry guy. I could feel cold sweat dripping down my back. My mouth was dry. I looked at her, and something inside my brain just clicked. A sudden, crystal-clear memory of a server password. A memory of an email printed out and locked in my fireproof safe. A memory of her telling me that tools of the trade are the employee's responsibility. "Okay," I said. Karen blinked. She was clearly expecting me to yell, to beg for my job, to threaten a massive lawsuit. When I just said okay, she looked genuinely disappointed, like I had ruined her fun. "Okay," she repeated. "Well, turn in your keycard to Dave. Security will escort you out of the building." I stood up, dropped my plastic keycard on her glass desk, and walked out. I did not say another word. The walk to my car felt like it took 3 hours. I was shaking so badly I could barely get my key into the door lock. I threw myself into the driver's seat and just sat there in the parking lot for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to remember how to breathe. Have you ever been so fiercely angry that you feel completely calm? It is a terrifying feeling. It is the eye of the hurricane. I drove home. I did not speed. I stopped at every single yellow light. I walked into my house, took off my shoes, poured myself a tall glass of cold tap water, and sat down at my personal computer desk. I booted up my computer. I opened my internet browser. I logged into my server hosting account. I navigated to the back-end control panel for the customer database. Let me be very clear about what this database had become. It was not just a simple list of phone numbers anymore. Because our company was so cheap and Karen was so incompetent, she had gradually forced the entire sales team to start relying on my system. Over the past 2 years, I had created user accounts for the other salesmen because I got tired of them begging me for leads. I let them use it as a personal favor. Slowly, without anyone really realizing it, my personal, private, self-funded server had become the central nervous system of the entire organization. Every single client contract, every renewal date, every piece of billing contact information, every single lead for the next 5 years was housed exclusively on my personal domain. The company had absolutely no backups. Why would they? Karen did not even understand how cloud storage worked, let alone data redundancy protocols. She thought the internet was just magic that lived inside her glowing monitor. I clicked on the Master Administration tab. I found the button that said Export. I downloaded a complete encrypted copy of the entire database to my local hard drive. I backed it up to a physical thumb drive. That data was mine, after all. I built it from scratch. I paid for it. Then I found the button that said Delete. My finger hovered over the mouse. I am not going to lie, I hesitated for a fraction of a second. This was the nuclear option. If I clicked this button, I was going to send a multi-million-dollar logistics software company back to the Stone Age. I was going to erase their entire operational capacity in the blink of an eye. But then I remembered Karen's smug smile. I remembered the $85,000 that she just brazenly stole from me. I remembered my best friend's wedding reception that I missed to secure that contract. I clicked delete. A red warning box popped up on the screen. Are you sure you want to permanently delete all data? This action cannot be undone, I typed in the confirmation word. Yes, I hit enter. The screen flashed. A little loading wheel spun around for about 3 seconds. Then, a blank white screen. Gone. Millions of dollars worth of intellectual property, tens of thousands of client contacts, years of organizational history. Completely, entirely, legally wiped from the face of the internet. But I was not done. I went into the domain registrar. I canceled the domain name registration so the web address would just return a dead error. I went into the server hosting account and terminated the entire server instance. I essentially burned their digital building to the ground and then salted the earth where it stood so nothing could ever grow back. Then I closed my laptop, walked into my living room, and turned on the television to watch some sports. I slept like an absolute baby that weekend. I slept a solid 9 hours each night. It was the most peaceful weekend of my adult life. Monday morning rolled around. I woke up at 9 o'clock. Usually, I would be at my office desk by 7:30, grinding through endless emails. Today, I made myself a large cup of premium dark roast coffee. I scrambled some eggs. I sat on my front porch and listened to the morning birds sing. At exactly 9:14 in the morning, my cell phone rang. I looked at the glowing screen. It was Karen. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Karen. I let it ring again. Over the next 2 hours, my phone rang 42 times. Karen called 20 times. Dave from Human Resources called 5 times. The chief executive officer, a man who had not spoken a single word to me in 3 years, called 12 times. My former coworkers called. It was a symphony of panic. At 11:30, I finally decided I had enough entertainment, so I answered. I picked up the phone. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice bright and aggressively cheerful. It was Karen. She was not laughing her fake, screechy laugh today. She was screaming. She was shrieking so loudly I actually had to hold the phone a few inches away from my ear. "What did you do?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "What did you do to the system?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my hot coffee. "I have no idea what you were talking about, Karen. I do not work there anymore, remember? I am not a good culture fit. The whole system is down," she yelled, sounding completely unhinged. "The website is gone. The leads are gone. The active client list is gone. Monthly billing is supposed to go out tomorrow, and we literally do not know who to bill or how much to charge them. Fix it right now, or I am calling the police and having you arrested." I chuckled. It was a genuine laugh, not a fake one like hers. "Karen," I said, "let us be very clear about this situation. That system is not down. That system is deleted. It no longer exists." There was a moment of dead, terrifying silence on the line. I could hear her breathing heavily, raggedly. "What do you mean deleted?" she whispered. I mean, I turned off my personal server, I explained slowly, using my absolute best customer service voice. You see, Karen, 3 years ago, I asked the company to reimburse me for a tool. You refused. You told me it was my personal property. You put it in writing. Since you fired me and stole my $85,000 commission on Friday afternoon, I decided I no longer wanted to provide free software hosting for a company I do not work for. So I packed up my personal property and I left, just like you asked me to. You cannot do that, she screeched, her voice reaching a pitch I did not know human vocal cords could produce. That is company data. That is corporate theft. We will sue you into oblivion. We will put you in federal prison. I smiled, even though she could not see it. Actually, Karen, if you look at the user agreement that I had everyone click accept on when they logged into my portal every morning, it clearly states that the database is the sole intellectual property of the server owner, which is me. I own the data. I own the leads. You guys just borrowed it for free. And now, the library is permanently closed. I hung up the phone. 10 minutes later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was the company's high-priced corporate lawyer. He tried the classic intimidation tactic. He used a lot of big words. He threatened injunctions, massive lawsuits, and criminal charges for computer hacking and corporate sabotage. I let him rant for about 5 solid minutes. Then, I calmly gave him the direct contact information from my own lawyer, a very aggressive employment attorney that I had retained over the weekend using a chunk of my savings. I told the corporate lawyer to request a copy of the email from 3 years ago from Karen, the one where she explicitly denied company ownership of the server. I also told him to review the employee handbook regarding stolen commissions and wrongful termination. I hung up on him too. The next few weeks were absolute, unmitigated chaos for them. My lawyer sent a brutal cease and desist letter, along with a printed copy of the Holy Grail email, and a formal legal demand for my $85,000, plus massive damages for wrongful termination and emotional distress. Without my database, the company was flying completely blind. Imagine a logistics software company trying to manage international freight contracts without knowing anyone's phone number, email address, physical location, or billing cycle. They could not send out automated invoices. They could not process software renewals. The salesman had absolutely no leads to call, so they just sat at their desks staring at the walls. It was complete corporate paralysis. And the massive whale client that I had just signed? They panicked when their dedicated account manager suddenly disappeared, and the parent company could not even figure out how to log them into the platform they just paid for. They invoked an emergency exit clause in their contract and pulled out within 10 days, taking their $3 million with them. Karen frantically tried to salvage the situation. She supposedly made the entire sales team sit in a stuffy conference room with a giant whiteboard, trying to brainstorm and write down every single client phone number they could remember off the tops of their heads. Can you imagine that? A multi-million-dollar tech company resorting to elementary school memory games to try and bill their massive corporate clients. Within 3 weeks, the company completely missed payroll. You cannot pay your employees when you cannot bill your clients. It is simple math. Within 4 weeks, the corporate investors found out what happened. They demanded an emergency board meeting. The chief executive officer desperately tried to throw Karen under the bus to save his own skin, but because of the deep-rooted nepotism, the board saw right through it. They realized the entire management team was hopelessly incompetent. At the end of the month, Karen was officially fired. Not a nice, gentle corporate layoff with a golden parachute severance package. She was fired with extreme prejudice for gross negligence. They repossessed her leased white luxury sports utility vehicle right out of the parking lot because the company had been paying for it as an executive perk, and they defaulted on the payments. She literally had to clean out her glass desk and take an Uber home. I really wish I could have seen that. I would have paid very good money to see her hauling her leopard print blouses and cheap plastic plants into the back of a beaten-up compact car. As for the company, they never recovered. You simply cannot survive a catastrophic data loss of that magnitude, especially when your reputation in the tight-knit logistics industry is completely ruined by a month of unpaid invoices and ghosted clients. 2 months after they fired me, they officially filed for bankruptcy. They dissolved the assets, laid off the remaining staff, and closed the doors forever. And me? Well, because they went bankrupt, I never actually got my $85,000 commission from them directly. But remember how I backed up my perfectly organized database to a physical thumb drive before I burned the server to the ground? I took that little thumb drive to their biggest, wealthiest competitor in the next city over. I walked into their front office, showed them a tiny, redacted sample of the scrubbed, highly detailed lead data I possessed, and explained my current situation. They hired me on the spot as a senior director of sales. They gave me a massive signing bonus that more than covered the entire commission I lost, plus a much higher base salary and better benefits. I brought my own server with me to the new job, of course, but this time I made absolutely sure the new company signed an ironclad contract paying me a hefty licensing fee every single month to use it. So, that is my crazy story. A greedy, incompetent boss thought she could use a shady corporate loophole to steal a massive payday from the guy who literally built her entire operation from the ground up. She thought she was completely untouchable sitting behind her glass desk in her terrible outfits, but she forgot the golden rule of modern business. Never ever mess with the computer guy, and never ever steal from the guy who holds the digital keys to the castle. I heard through the industry grapevine that Karen is now working retail somewhere, trying to sell luxury anti-aging cosmetics to teenagers at a dying mall. I am sure she is still aggressively using the word synergy while she tries to push overpriced face cream. And I am sure she is still parking across 2 spots, assuming she ever managed to get her hands on another car. Sometimes I think about driving over to that mall, walking into her store, and buying a single tube of cheap lip gloss just to make her ring me up on the cash register. I think about looking her right in the eye, smiling, and telling her it is a great culture fit. But honestly, I am way too busy closing massive deals and enjoying my peaceful, highly profitable life. Living well really is the best, most satisfying revenge. Thanks for listening to my rant. Stay safe out there. Do not let corporate bullies step on you. And always, always keep your receipts.